Our sponsor, Olsson Associates, thank you very much for sponsoring our event today. And I'm going to introduce Kaylea. The ability to deal skillfully with difficult conversations is a core characteristic of both successful organizations and successful individuals. As we all know, starting difficult conversations can be challenging. Using a smart start approach can get the conversation going in the right direction, hopefully all participants at great speed. Today's speaker, Kaylea Dunn, is here today to give us an overview of the Smart Start approach. Kaylea is a human resource project specialist at Olsson Associates with more than 15 years of combined recruiting, client services, and training experience. She received a bachelor's degree in business and a master's degree in
leadership education.
Leadership education for both UNL. She also earned a professional human resources certification in 2012. Kaylea has extensive public speaking experience as well as an expansive background in relationship building, client services, teamwork, and training. Please help me in welcoming Kaylea.
Thank you. Thank you. So I talk a lot with my hands, so this is the first time I've used a handheld mic to present, so we'll see how this goes. I might be doing this a lot, so I'll try to keep it in front of me. I'm really happy to be back and presenting to you again. I presented, I think, in January of this year on the first step of this process, but I'm going to go through, I've given you a handout that lists all 4 steps of the process that I present at our organization, Olsson Associates. The training that I'm presenting to you today comes from a book called Crucial Accountability. And has anyone heard of that before? Crucial Accountability or Crucial Conversations, maybe? Some people I work with do. But this is actually a book that is put out by a group, I just want to show it to you here, called Vital Smarts. And they do this training. It's usually a 2-day training on conflict, which everyone is so excited to sign up for, I'm sure. And they do a great job, though. It's a lot of interaction. So we're going to have a pretty interactive session today as well. And so today we're going to be focusing on the Smart Start. For most of the employees at Olsson Associates, this is pretty difficult to get the conversation started. And so we spend a lot of time going through this piece, and I'm hoping that you'll be able to walk away with a few tools. So as a trainer, of course, I have to have course objectives. And here are the 2 course objectives I plan to cover today. Distinguish what a smart start consists of and how to utilize it when addressing conflict, and applying the 3 pieces of the smart start through scripting conversations. And you'll notice today we'll go through an activity where you'll be scripting out the conversation. I find this to be extremely beneficial when I walk into any kind of conflict situation, that I have some bullet points and a rough script in front of me. It really does help guide the conversation. So for those of you that weren't able to attend the first session that I did earlier this year, or just in case you did and it's been a few months and you need a refresher, I'm going to talk through our first step a little bit more in detail. First here is defining the problem. Now, if you have a conflict you need to address with a family member where you haven't spoke in maybe 8 or 10 years, this is probably not the right seminar for you. This information is really going through a violated expectation. When you have an expectation of someone and they've missed that. And it's important to remember that a perceived problem is a real problem. I know this seems very obvious. Our staff at our organization thinks that as well. But I do bring it up because many times we know in our gut if someone is not happy with us, or if there is a concern or a problem there, that we probably do need to address it. So let's talk about that first step a little bit more in detail. We want to think about the stories that we tell ourselves. What typically happens is what you'll see on this graph up here. We see something, then we jump to a conclusion about it. Why did this happen? Then we feel about that. I'm mad about this, I'm angry about this, I can't believe this person did this to me. And then maybe eventually we will act on it. We'll go have that conversation with that individual. This happens to all of us, we do this a lot, but this really isn't the ideal way to address a conflict, because we've built up a story when we've allowed to jump to conclusions and start to pull our feelings in. And what happens is when we start to tell that story to ourselves of this person's lazy, or they don't care about me, or they just don't care about the project, or whatever it might be, we also give ourselves permission to not behave and not to act as nice to that individual too. And it helps justify our actions. And we talked last time about what silence and violence looks like in conflict. And we know there's both verbal and nonverbal things that will come up with that. I think I mentioned last time a story of when I confronted someone in our office when I worked in a human resources role and capacity. That individual, I saw them later at the grocery store, and we were walking down the aisle, and I waved to them, and they turned around and walked the other way. That surely doesn't feel well, and obviously they had some feelings about the interaction we had that they might not have expressed, but they were expressing it at that time. So it's really natural for us to do this, and the reason for that, if you remember, is the fundamental attribution error. Now hopefully you know kind of what's happening in this picture. One time one of the employees at Olsson said, "Oh, the guy just dropped his cell phone." And that is surely not what I'm going for here. This is a picture where I assume the guy just got cut off in traffic. And I know when I get cut off in traffic, I get pretty angry, and that might be the reaction of most of us is, "What the heck just happened? I can't believe this happened to me." However, if I cut someone off in traffic, I have a really good reason for that. Maybe my Surrey wasn't working correctly or didn't tell me when I needed to turn, or I have a few children that drive in my car with me, and so if they were screaming or yelling in the background and got me distracted and then I realized I needed to turn quickly, I have really good reasons why I cut other people off, but they don't have good reasons why they cut me off. This exemplifies the fundamental attribution error. We always make really good reasons for ourselves and excuses for ourselves of why we do something, but we attribute the worst case scenario to others that do the exact same thing. The reason for this is that it's survival instincts. If I'm getting cut off, I could get into a big car accident, and so I have to immediately respond and feel about that situation and act quickly. But many times we will do that in other situations as well. We will assume the worst of other people, basically because many times it's a survival instinct. We don't understand why someone has not met an expectation, and so we kind of go into that negative place pretty quickly to kind of survive or protect ourselves. Because when someone doesn't meet an expectation, it can affect us in the workplace too. It might hurt our project, it might hurt how we look to our supervisor or to others on our team. And so we do go sometimes into that survival instinct. A lot of times we assume the worst of people because, again, it's a survival mechanism. So at our organization, sometimes people don't meet a deadline because they might not have the ability to, meaning they need more training, they don't know how to do a certain aspect of the job. We see that a lot sometimes with like our technicians, and they're doing CAD drafting and design, and our CAD software changes, I think, like daily. And if they didn't learn something new in that software, they get stuck for a while, and that can delay them in their time frame. It doesn't mean they didn't want to do it, they just didn't have the full ability to. Or you have others that impact you as well, and that could be either a motivation. So if you have somebody on another team who you're working on a bigger project for, and that means more money for you, that might motivate you a little bit more to get that project done versus the project that I might have with you. Or there's an ability issue. Sometimes we're waiting on external consultants or clients to get things to us, and so that delays us on our time frame. And then structural here at the bottom is kind of beyond our control and beyond maybe others' control. It's really easy to explain, like when you think of like natural disasters, or if you're moving buildings or things like that, your computer system goes down. Those are things that can limit you from meeting timelines as well, that are really beyond control for many people. So if you think of this or keep this in mind as you go into conflict, that maybe I think this person has bad intentions towards me, but maybe not. And 90% or if not higher of the time, they really don't have bad intentions towards us. There was probably something else that impacted them from meeting that commitment and having that violated expectation. I'm going through this kind of fast because this was the stuff I talked about last time. But any questions so far on this? No? Okay. So just to round this out, when you think about going into conflict and starting a conversation, you really want to think about what story am I telling myself in my head, and put that to the side, and really be inquisitive. You know, you're in communications trying to find out the story. What is their side of the story? I have maybe a starting side of my story of what I think happened, or factually what I know happened, but what's their side of that as well? So I always think about that tentative approach. I'm going in to get information from them to figure out how we don't have this happen again and solve it. Now, if you're just mad and you want that person to be mad, don't use any of the stuff I'm talking to you about, because you're walking in with feeling. And you'll get your message across, trust me, because we all know we've probably been recipients of that when someone's mad at us and they let us know that in a meeting. But if you're really trying to figure it out and you want to work effectively with that person in the future, this is the way to kind of approach that conversation, is having that tentative approach, trying to figure out what's the rest of the story that's going on, becoming curious. Okay, so these are the 3 areas that we're going to kind of talk through. Safety check and starters is the first part of this. Sharing your path and popping the question. And all of this, believe it or not, is about a paragraph long of text, if that. Because what will happen is if we go in and we start telling a whole story of, you didn't meet the deadline, so I had to stay late last night, I missed my kid's reception program, and blah, 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 you've given that person 5 to 10 minutes to build a story in their head or to come up with a defense. And you've probably seen some emotion come out already in that amount of time. But when we start a conversation, that initial start, really we want to make this short and brief and to the point, because you want to get that person engaged in the conversation, not give them time to build up a story or to come up with a defense, okay? And I wanted to start with the safety check. And in our organization, we're kind of in cubicle land. Everyone can hear everyone's conversations. And so I recommend thinking about the safety of the kind of conversation you're going to get into. If you think that this could be something, I mean, if it's just like, hey, you missed this report deadline, what happened? And it's you think it's a simple conversation, sure, you can have it right there at the desk, but just be aware that other people are listening, and sometimes that individual will go to silence or be very agreeable because they don't want that attention or they don't want everyone else around them hearing what you're talking about. In our organization, we recommend people do go into a conference room. We're in the Haymarket, so there's like 50 restaurants you could walk to and get a cup of coffee to. So maybe even just going for a walk around the block or getting out of a facility. Because sometimes our conference rooms are kind of the dreaded, like, oh, where are they going in the conference room? So if there's a way where you can have a person come get a pop in the break room or something with you and have a conversation, just thinking about that safety that you can provide that individual will help them be a little bit more open in those conversations too. Okay, so I'm going to give you a second here to read over this scenario, and then we're going to talk about this at our tables as well. Now, I apologize if any of you are named Michael or Dwight. I didn't catch that in intros. I don't think anyone is. I use characters from TV shows, but these are real scenarios that happen, not just our organization, but I've worked with some other organizations that have these things. I may have made this one a little extreme with the person cussing and surfing the net, but I bet maybe some of us know an employee who does one of these things at least that can be sometimes distracting in our work environment, and either you've been frustrated by it or other teammates of yours maybe have been. So I'm hoping this is relatable to all of you in some sense. So what I'd like you to do, you've got this situation at hand, and on your tables, what I want you to do is you each have a sheet, or 2 sheets you should, and I want you to partner up, or if you have like at least 2 people, maybe 3 people per group, but look at a bad way of starting this. There's 5 different ways that we're going to talk about that are not ideal in starting off a conversation. So I've defined it for you, and based on this scenario, I want you to come up with the bad way that I've given you in front of you, because we really want to define these and talk about why we don't want to start a conversation this way. So you should have this little sheet, and it gives you an example of one of these items up here. And with your partner, kind of talk through what would be the way you'd start that, exemplifying this example here. Does that make sense? And kind of write down something, because we'll go around and share the not so ideal smart starts. I'll again give you this situation here so you can look at that. Spend too much time on the bad way because we want to learn the right way. But I want to go through and just talk through the examples you might have used or what you kind of came up with for your scenario for each of these, just to kind of reiterate why you don't want to start these this way. Even though it might be fun, as some of you mentioned in the back. I agree, and I've used all of these methods before as well. So the first is sandwiching. So who had sandwiching? Okay, so how, oh, you guys did too? Okay, we'll get to surprise attack. We'll get to that one. So sandwiching, what would that sound like if you were going to address Dwight? What did you guys talk about?
Saying, oh, your sweater is really pretty today, I like it, and then you go into something that makes you feel defensive.
Yep. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, so is that, you guys have anything?
Yeah, actually, being the supervisor, so I know what the quality of work he has. So basically, I would start in, hey, Dwight, how are you doing today? Hey, by the way, I love the project, with your hand in this project X, Y, and Z that we did last week. Oh, by the way, I just wanted to mention to you if there's anything that is going on that you want to talk about or something. I think this foul language and everything that is going on in the office at this moment, it's kind of getting other people off the focusing on whatever. But anyway, but that you are a great part of the team, very vital to the team, and I'm really available for you anytime you want to talk about anything.
Very good. Very good. Okay. So it does sound like you maybe have at least heard this before, if not done this before. And again, I've done this before. I mean, I think a lot of us maybe have done this, or at least been, the recipient of this. And why do we do this? Why do we approach sandwiching?
We don't like conflict.
Because we don't like conflict.
Doesn't make it feel so bad.
Leave on a positive note, doesn't feel so bad, yeah. But what a lot of times this method does is it can really confuse an employee. They think they're getting a compliment, then you throw a dig in, and then you're giving them another compliment. So what should they focus on? Because honestly, if I'm getting compliments, I just want to hear those. Or if I'm not doing well, I just really want to hear about that. I don't want you to tell me, you're really good in everything else, but yeah, this you're awful at. Because then I don't know where to put my focus. You know, it's confusing for me at least. So thinking about, even though it feels nice and you're leaving on a positive note and hey, I want to save our relationship as much as I can because this is so awkward to talk to you about this, that can really be very confusing for the individual you're addressing when you sandwich. And it's, again, not the best way to start out a conversation. Great examples, though. You guys did great. Complimenting someone on their sweater or how they look today, and then going into something they're not performing on. So the other kind of game that they label is surprise attack. So do you guys want to talk about the examples you came up with that? Anyone?
Our thought was, hey Dwight, heard you were having a lot of fun this weekend. You're telling that story a lot. What, 20 minutes each for each story? Do you think you're spending a little too much time telling your stories and a little not enough working on your projects?
Okay.
That was our thought.
That wasn't quite as much a surprise, but that's good. That's not really the best way either. That one is actually kind of not listed here. That's kind of more direct, but there's not really a solution in mind because you're putting them on the defense. Okay, but it's a good example of a bad one. But a surprise attack is more like, hey, how was your weekend, Dwight? Oh yeah, tell me more about that. Or what'd you think of that game? Yeah, I really need to talk to you about your foul language. Like, so they think they're having a really nice conversation with you, and then boom, you jump into the bad thing. Has anyone ever had that before? Like you have a really nice 5-minute conversation with your boss or somebody else, and then boom, they drop the bomb on you that something bad. They really were wanting to come talk to you about something bad. Yeah, it's not great because, again, then you're wondering, well, what was the true intention of, did they even care about that first 5 minutes of the conversation we had, or were they even sincere in that, or was it that they were just trying to build up that courage to actually bring up the bad item they wanted to talk to me about? So again, it can leave that employee kind of confused, or that other person. I say employee, but again, personal life, this can be used anywhere. So, but good examples. So charades, you guys have that. Okay, so what would charades be like?
Well, I guess
Sorry, I'll give you the mic.
We can finally figure out what we were doing, but the closing your arms close to your side, giving the head nod, stomping your feet, looking at them, or the glare, no verbal context.
Yep. Yeah, charades is a pretty obvious one where it's nonverbal use. I used charades last night at my child's Christmas program because he was doing this after he got done saying his lines. He's in kindergarten. And I was just, if looks could kill or throw the mic down on the stage, that was basically what I was trying to do. I was like, doing hand signals for him to stop, and he knew immediately. I was not happy. So we use charades. Again, I'm used it a lot with my kids. They're the recipients of that. But even at the workplace, I had someone when I worked at the university prior to working at Olsson, and I worked night events because I recruited high school students. And so I had an agreement with my supervisor after some long nights where I could come in at 9 o'clock, and I would walk in and say good morning, and one of the people at the front would then look at her watch, good morning. Like, oh, you finally decided to show up. I mean, like, there's some really nonverbal, obvious cues that people can give that are kind of approaching a conversation that aren't really ideal. So good examples of charades. And believe it or not, you might use this more than you expect, at least if you have young boys, I guess. I don't know, or children in general. I use it all the time with them. But this can come up quite a bit, both in personal and professional life. Pass the buck. Who has that one? You guys do. Okay, so what might that sound like?
Hi, Dwight. I heard your conversation with Tom. I mean, I think it's cool that you talk about all this, but I'm pretty sure we should make sure that our boss doesn't hear the conversation.
Perfect. So what's the point of passing the buck?
We're the good guys.
Yeah, you guys are the good guys, and somebody else is the bad guy, right? Yeah. This is one that, again, it's you wouldn't want to. A lot of times, it still might offend you. For example, with Dwight, if he's cussing or saying bad things or surfing the net. but you're kind of putting it on somebody else to take the blame so you don't have to deal with the consequences there. Like, hey, we're still friends. I'm sorry I have talked to you about this, but so-and-so made me. We hear this a lot at our company of, well, I didn't want to talk to you, but corporate is making us make this change. So did you have an example too?
What if that's true, though, that you heard that another supervisor is frowning on it and you're kind of wanting to clue in your colleague? Is that still not maybe a good thing?
That's okay. That would be a different way to start the conversation. First of all, if somebody else is, it's a couple different scenarios there. If someone is frustrated with my employee and what they're choosing to do, no matter if they're a supervisor or somebody else, I would ask if they've talked to them first. Because one thing that I will talk a little bit more at the end about is sometimes as supervisors, we take on other people's problems to address an employee. And if I've been on the receiving end of this too, where if someone would have just directly come and talked to me versus my supervisor now talking to me about it, that feels a lot different because the situation's elevated. Now, if it's a supervisor to supervisor talking about an employee and them being inappropriate, I don't think it's a bad idea to have both supervisors there to kind of talk through how can we make this better. But I would encourage that other individual, depending on the role in the scenario, to first address that employee with the issue they have, and not to take on that problem for me to address, especially if I haven't witnessed it or seen it or if I don't have any problems. Because then it's putting me in the middle of, as like kind of the telephone game of, well, they said this, now you're telling me this, then I have to go back to this person and tell them that. And that just creates so much more work for us. Even if we're a supervisor, it doesn't mean you don't care about that individual and their success, but encourage that other employee to talk to them before you get involved. And if that conversation isn't successful, then you can get involved at that point. If it's a supervisor who's frustrated with one of your employees, maybe the three of you meet and they can talk through their concerns, but I'd still have that person address the individual because otherwise you're kind of getting in the game of telephone. And you can definitely say, we're meeting today because Joe Smith over here said that you were doing these things, we want to talk through that. But that feels a little bit different than, well, I didn't want to talk to you, but so-and-so told me about this problem. Does that make sense, or is that you can see the difference there? That's a really good question, though. And that happens all the time, too, where people come to you and they dump their problems wanting you to address it, and because it's someone you oversee, but really it should be them that probably try to address it first, at least. Good example. All right, last one, read my mind. I'm assuming it's you guys back here. Okay. I should have known that, yeah. That's a good example of it.
Okay, so we have something like, Dwight, I'm getting a lot of complaints around the office, and it seems like some of them may include you. ...
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's pretty left open and ambiguous. Here's an example of my personal life. Shane, how was school today? Anything happen that you want to talk to me about? Anything specifically at recess? Anything involving Tony at recess? Like that kind of thing. So the read my mind, that is, hey, I've heard some things going on. You want to talk about it? Like, it's kind of a, you bring up a real general topic and they have no idea what kind of conversation they're getting into, and then you maybe get a little more specific, and it's like you know the answer and you're wanting them to tell you the answer. So again, I use it a lot, obviously, in my personal life, but this is something that happens a lot at work, too, of, what'd you think of that meeting yesterday? You just kind of ask leading questions to see what their response is, or if they even have a clue as to what you're trying to get at. And again, you think about that from the employee's perspective. They have no idea what kind of conversation they're walking into. What does that do? It elevates their defense mechanisms. It's going to make that a more of an emotional, charged conversation than if you're straight to the point with them. So I want to show this quick example because, again, I've shown a lot of personal life examples already, but I always think this show kind of gives good examples of this. So just for a fun clip.
Whoa, pretty sure all that deserves a shout out right about now. Sorry, should have taken the temperature room first. What's up?
Luke and Manny, I did you are real lovely. We're changing a little. Can I ever say, in Europe, this will be no big deal. But yeah, you can see me in my underwear whenever you want. They're amazing. Okay, girls, stop getting so hysterical over everything. Come on. Grow up a little. I need things to start changing around here, or I will change things, okay? There will be no more TV and no internet and no whatever else I can think of. Man, what's wrong with you, Phil?
All right, that is one of my favorite shows. And I like it because you saw the good cop, bad cop very easily there. But even the threats the mom gives of like, there will be no more internet, you will not fight for the rest of your lives, no more yelling. I mean, those are things that happen when we get emotionally charged and walk in with emotion into a conversation versus thinking about it first and what is our outcome, what is our result that we want out of that conversation. Again, if we want them to know we're mad, you don't need to do a lot of prep work for that. But if you want to have a better relationship with that individual, that's really where you want to come in with that tentative approach, really try to understand their side of it. So let's talk about the good ways to do this, okay? So here's some examples of effective starters. And what I'd like you to do is as we go through each piece here, I'd like as a table for you kind of each, after we talk through them, to script out how you would confront Dwight as Michael with that scenario we have using the better method, okay? So these are some examples. This is the first sentence you generally will say to the individual, okay? It's just one sentence. I want to talk to you about what just happened, or I'd like to understand a little bit more about what happened in this meeting yesterday. Can we talk about that? You're letting them know right away what the intention of your conversation is. You don't have to go into a lot of details here. It's just, hey, I want to talk to you about ABC, or I want to talk to you about, I don't want to give you guys answers to what you're supposed to do, but I'd like to talk to you about the deadline that you missed yesterday and what happened there. Do you have a few minutes to talk? And then we'll kind of go into the next steps. But it's letting them know right away what you want to address with them. So it's pretty straightforward, to the point. It's usually one sentence long. It doesn't have to be really ornate or thought out, but it's definitely makes it very clear what you're going to talk to them about. Make sense? So take a moment with your table and kind of think through what would be your scenario. Again, I'll put it back up here just in case you need to look at it again. What would you say to Dwight? How would you get him engaged in that conversation? All right, I'm going to move on to the next step because I think I hear some of you getting there already. So I want to talk about this next step because that first step is truly like a sentence long. So now this is where you're sharing your path. So before the conversation with that tentative approach, I mentioned you want to think about what is the goal or the outcome of this conversation you want to have with Dwight. So is it as simple as, I want us to be able to work effectively together. I want us to all be working in an environment that everyone's comfortable in. What is the goal that you have, and what could be the shared common ground? Because again, Dwight's probably a reasonable, rational person. And so what could you guys share as a goal? I want us to be able to work well together. I want our environment to feel comfortable for everybody involved. And I know you want that too. Think about what is your common goal there and shared ground that you'd have with that person, the good intentions that you're seeking out. So that's what you would want to incorporate. I wonder if we could talk about the recent activities that have happened in our work area in regards to surfing the net, conversations, blah, blah, blah. I'm giving you guys the answers basically, but these are kind of the ways to think about it, okay? So this is the first part. I'm going to go through these two because I want to kind of explain it. And then you want to have facts to it, okay? Not the I feel. Now in some conflict trainings of the past, they talk a lot about the I feel because you're owning your feelings. Okay, we don't want feelings here because that's where then again the defenses come up and it doesn't really get too productive. But if you have facts that you can state, that brings a little bit more power to your case and trying to get them engaged too so they can clarify those facts for you or what you understood happened versus them. So I've noticed that the other day at around 2 o'clock, I was talking with a client and I heard you use the F-bomb, blah, blah, blah. I mean, you could give a factual statement on that. Or I've noticed when I walked by the other day, you were surfing on eBay looking for skis or, whatever. I mean, you can give factual statements. So it's only one or two. This is, again, where it's the slippery slope of someone wanting to tell the whole backstory. But what are the most critical facts that are important to sharing so that a person understands what you have concern about, okay? What can kind of happen here too sometimes is if I talked in my first session, it's really easy to address a one-time issue, a content issue, but then when it becomes a pattern, you build up a lot of facts. And then when it affects your relationship, that's even harder and there's lots of facts there. So again, picking those couple of critical facts you want to share because this intro start is really only about a paragraph long. And I'm having you script that because I tend to script my start. And I am not reading it off a piece of paper when I go talk to someone, but it keeps me on track, especially if at the top I have what is my common goal or objective here that I want to walk out with, and where is our shared goal as well. Like what do I assume Dwight thinks, and that I want us to be able to work effectively together. We don't have to be best friends, but we got to have better communication. I would hope you'd want that too, so we can serve our client. Because that's, again, like those kinds of things. Most people would want to serve clients well or to work well with their fellow teammates generally. So thinking about sharing your path with the good intentions and seeking common ground, and then maybe 1 or 2 facts, and you don't really know the full facts of the scenario, so you can make something fun up, but come up with that piece of the conversation, what you'd say. And again, I hopefully have given you some good examples there. I'll give you a few more minutes for that. All right, so I want to move on to the last part of sharing your path, because there's another piece of this, but it kind of comes with the end too. So a couple of things to think about is, again, maybe just 1 sentence, 2 at most, depending on what the scenario is, where you want to tentatively tell your story. Like, so how is, if they're cussing and they're surfing the net, how is that impacting you? So what's your role in this? Why are you bringing this to them? So it's, again, not a big I feel type thing. It's more, I'm starting to think that this could really affect our team or our work environment, and that's why I'm wanting to talk to you about this. It's, well, so why are you bringing all of this up? Is kind of the idea behind this. It's just 1 more sentence to kind of say why you have skin in the game here. Besides the common goal and path that you're trying to address, it's why you yourself have brought this up, especially as a supervisor. A lot of times a great way to kind of say this is, I care about your success here at the firm, and I think it's important we talk through this. Show them you're caring, you're telling them because you care about them instead of not addressing it. So one thing too to kind of keep in mind is contrasting. And that's something that you'll see, that individual you're addressing might start to get, well, no, they cut you off, or they're get argumentative, or oh no, I don't do that, or you can physically tell, or they go into like maybe crying or things. And hey, I'm not trying to upset you here. I just want to really clarify what happened, or what we did, or what was missed, or because I care about you and I want us to work effectively together. It puts those defenses down sometimes if you can use contrasting. So if you sense that they're getting very emotional, or if they start to cut you off in this smart start, which sometimes people do because they have a side to it too, they want you to hear, hey, we're going to get to that. Hey, I'm not trying to upset you. I really want to understand what happened. That can help bring some of those emotions down, because then they understand what your goal is. Your goal is to work with that person or to get through this. You're not coming at them just to let them know you're mad about it. So contrasting can help. You don't have to script out contrasting, but think about like what's that last sentence you would say to them to kind of on why it's important that you're bringing this to their attention. And then you pop the question. So then you're asking them, is that how you see it? Or is that how you understand it? Or what do you think? Or how is this impacting you? Or have you noticed this? You put it back on them to get them engaged. So that's why this is really only about a paragraph long, maybe 4 to 5, 6 at most sentences, because you're just trying to give some information to them to understand their side of the story, which is tentatively telling your story, kind of why you're bringing this to them, and then what would be your question you would pose back to them to get them engaged, to get Dwight engaged and talking back to you, hopefully in a productive way. So I'd like you guys as a table just to briefly kind of go through your script for the rest of us to kind of hear what you came up with this conversation. So, no, well, someone's got to take the mic.
You guys, go ahead.
Come on, me. Hey, I do not speak English.
And we'll have a chance for everybody, so go ahead.
So how do we start?
Yeah.
Give me some cues. Sorry?
What's happened?
What happened? Okay. So, hi Dwight. I see a little bit distracted.
We're having everyone go around. If I can have your attention back up here, we're going to have each table go through their script. So, if we can have your attention. So, we got first one going here.
Hello Dwight. How are you today? It seems that I see you a little distracted this morning. Is there anything that is going on that you would like to share that I could help you with, or that we could work together? What else would you like to do?
I've seen that you have been swearing a lot.
Oh yeah, I've seen that you've been swearing a lot. You've been surfing the internet, a lot of Facebook probably. You know, it's kind of like if there's any reason in particular that you were absent-minded about not being able to concentrate at work, I was more than happy to help you out with this. You know, my door is open for you.
Okay. Okay, so any comments to that one?
There weren't any specific examples?
Yeah, they gave some specific examples kind of towards the end, like the Facebook, and I noticed you've been swearing a lot. So in this one, something that stood out to me immediately, and this is because I do this all the time, because you guys did a good job, is just sometimes even a few more words can bomb that. So you said, I noticed you've been kind of absent-minded. And that could put someone on the defense. So the less words you use, sometimes the better. Like, could you tell me how this has been, or what you see, or something. You put it back to them without kind of giving a little bit of judgment on why you think they might be that way, or how it might appear. They might appear to be absent-minded, but that might, what if they're doing that because they've had someone just die in their family? I mean, you never know, like, that's dramatic, but maybe they are trying to kind of keep their mind off of something, or they've had something really bad happen that's causing them this emotion. Who knows? So you don't want to add fuel to the fire. It's very minor, but I think the examples you gave and how you started was good. Just thinking about even taking a word or two away sometimes can make a big impact in how that person receives it. But good example. Okay, how about back here? You guys have one? You want to share?
I think I'm a spokesperson now.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, Dwight, I'd like to talk to you about the ops environment and how we can improve it. I heard foul language twice last week. Is everything okay? It's affecting the team, and I want to be sure that we're all in a position to be our best. How can we make sure that happens?
Because our best line is, what the hell's wrong with
you? That was good. Yeah. It's good not to maybe say that. That's your undertone maybe you're thinking in your head, but yes, that's good to not express it. I liked that one too. You guys have any comments to that one? Yeah.
That's a 10.
The one thing is, if you say, is everything okay after talking about the cussing, that might be where they want to jump in and start talking. And then you had some really good stuff right after that too of, I want us to be able, so maybe move is everything okay? Because you could be concerned about them. If they're cussing and they're angry and they're, again, there could be some personal things going on. Maybe move that to the end when you're popping the question to them of, can we talk about how to address this? But I thought it was great. Good job. All right, anyone else over here want to do theirs? You guys are just looking. Anyone? No? Oh, yes? Okay.
We don't really have a script, and I got trapped in trying to figure out which of the three situations was the easiest to address, and I figured that the internet use one was the easiest because you probably have a company policy about the appropriate use of company resources. And you have server logs from the IT department, so it would be very factually based on what that person is doing. And then on cussing, does it create a bad public impression of the company that people who are visiting, or do you have a policy about appropriate language in the workplace? I'm probably the last person to do non-scripted conversations, so that's my analytical thoughts about it.
Well, I'm going to comment to that because that's a really good point. And see, this is why I like this situation too, because there are policies a lot of times around this. So you can bring up and say, I've noticed you've been doing this, but as a supervisor too, there are guidelines you can present to them, and it becomes more conversation about, I expect you to meet my guideline or our company's guidelines that have been set forth with policy. We need to be following the policies of our companies. They're set here for a reason. So you kind of have backing as a supervisor on addressing this situation as well. And it's a good point. I mean, we've had at our organization, we can pull records to see what people are doing and how much time they're spending on the internet versus doing actual work. I mean, so that, depending on the severity of the situation, this is a situation where the employees maybe been doing a couple things that haven't been addressed. And so you're addressing patterns of behavior probably versus just one specific scenario, like they're surfing too much or they're using foul language. There's a couple of things you're having to address here with their behavior. But definitely utilizing company policies to back the reason. I mean, that gives you some backing to the part I'm not presenting today, but after you get through the Smart Start of where the gap is, defining that gap. This is the company's expectations, this is the behavior, and we need to figure out how to close that gap. So good comments there. I know I'm kind of getting close to time here. Anyone dying up here to share their script? Or any other comments? No? Okay. All right. Well, I wanted to just show you a couple other things. This is something that I want to stress. I know we're talking about Smart Start, but again, bringing in a script or some bullet points allows you an opportunity also to document the results or what the outcome is going to be. I just use some examples of how I document things. I even, in meetings, you'll see the one on the left is my really bad writing, but on the sidebar, I put a question mark for questions I have throughout the meeting. I for information, like I need to remember this or put this somewhere, and then A is my action items. And so I will even say at the end of the meeting, okay, so my action items are this, and this. So whether you're addressing someone or if you're trying to just understand what's happening happening in all the meetings you sit through every day. These are just a couple of tips. I also use my Outlook like crazy, and so I'll put appointments on my calendar. This is another thing in helping hold someone accountable if they've agreed to a commitment, is using these kinds of tools to help hold that person accountable. There's a lot more in the books, yes?
I should probably know this since I do this too, but can't someone else look at your notes?
Yes, yeah, it depends on their viewership of my calendar, but yes, other people can look at my notes. So that is something to be thoughtful of, is if you're writing down an issue in your calendar appointment, maybe not to have that public to everybody. But yes, that is something that other people can look at the calendar invites, depending on the permissions in your Outlook account. As I mentioned, I gave you another sheet, and this is kind of extra bonus. So Cy Wakeman is another person that we use her books a lot in our training. And she's done a lot of work with different industries and working on cultural changes and organizational development. And she has, when employees come to her, because I mentioned this, someone talked about, well, what if another supervisor comes and confronts me? If an employee comes to her with a problem, she asks them, what's your SBAR? Give me the situation, what's the background, what's your assessment, and what is your recommendation? And I love that, because that allows it so that it doesn't come back on you to solve, but you're encouraging your employees to solve it. Because a lot of times, especially as supervisors, we take on a lot more problems than we actually need to. It's good to know about them. I'm not saying we shouldn't know about these things, and give your employees the tools to try to work through the conflicts that they have at work. So there's an article from a blog that she has that kind of goes through that a little bit more in detail, but I wanted to give that as just maybe an additional tool outside of what I was talking about. As I mentioned, these are the books, Reality-Based Leadership and Reality-Based Rules of the Workplace are two great books by Cy Wakeman, and we follow Crucial Accountability, and Crucial Conversations is also a great tool. It's kind of the first step before Crucial Accountability. A lot of times accountability has to deal with broken expectations or violated expectations. So that is it for my presentation. I want to open up to any questions. Sorry, I'm running a little late on time, but thank you again so much for letting me come, and open up to any questions you might have.